I'm Ken Sterling, and this is Sports Media 101. This week, I want to talk about complaints. A lot of people look at complaints to media as negative. They're not negative. They're entirely positive. They aren't about criticism. They are about engagement. That is what they reflect, is engagement. Engagement is good. I've always told talent that in research studies and management too, because management sometimes reads this wrong. When you do a study, you have a talent graded from 1 to 5. 1, you're very negative about that person. 5, you're very positive about that person. And 3, you're somewhere in between. You're kind of apathetic. What we don't want 3s. If you have a graph 1 to 5 that's like this, that's a talent that's not getting through. If you have a talent that 1 to 5 is this, kind of a U instead of a hump, that is a successful talent because they are getting through. Negative, positive, it really doesn't matter as long as the two kind of balance each other out. You don't want entirely negative. That would be bad. But negative and positive basically split or a little bit favoring positive. That is a really good talent whose message is cutting through to your community. It's a good thing. And complaints, they are an opportunity to pick up the phone or to send an email, a reply, and say, you know what? I heard you. Thank you very much. Here's why we did what we did. When I was at WIBC in Indianapolis, we were an affiliate of Rush Limbaugh. And anytime we would preempt Rush Limbaugh, the phone in the studio would light up. You know, severe weather, it didn't matter what happened. Any kind of breaking news, people came to the radio station for Rush Limbaugh. But our primary brand was that of a local radio station who was going to respond to local events in a way that served the community. So take, for instance, severe weather. Severe weather happens, it preempts Rush Limbaugh, people start calling. Whether I was the program director or assistant program director, I would run into the studio and I would take calls for the duration of the calls. The calls are 239-1070 was the number. WIBC, this is Kent Sterling. What can I help you with? Oh, well, you know what? We try to serve our community. And we've got severe weather in the area, in Marion County. And because of that, we've cut away from Rush Limbaugh. And we're talking about the severe weather because the severe weather is going to directly impact the lives of citizens in our community. Oh, well, okay. Thank you very much. And go on to the next call and take them forever. Because what those people were doing was giving me an opportunity, number one, to fortify my brand one-on-one as a community leader, a live and local community leader, even when we were in syndicated programming like Rush Limbaugh. That was key. I knew that these people were going to go out and say, you know, I called 239-1070, and this guy answered and identified himself as Kent Sterling, the assistant program director, or program director when I was that. And, you know, he kind of explained it. They just want to be good partners in the community. That message traveled 1 to 2 to 2 to 4 and on, geometrically, one would hope. I'd take 40 or 45, 50 calls and be happy doing it because it gave me an opportunity one-on-one to people who already knew he existed and were plugged into the radio station, gave me an opportunity to talk to them and maybe win them over and have them realize that we are there for them. That was a big deal to me. And rightly so. And I was taught this by a guy named Bobby Hatfield, who's our program director back in the mid-90s. And during his short stint as program director, what Bobby did was, you know what, Bobby was trying to serve our sales department. This is kind of complicated, but regardless, the Brickyard 400 in 1995, right? 1995, there was bad weather. And it looked like it was going to be pushed to the following day. And so Bobby, wanting to get out of the way some network inventory that we would be responsible for the following day on Sunday if they pushed the race, he started playing Dr. Dean Adele during the rain delay of the Brickyard 400. We had a guy at the time, Robin Miller, the late Robin Miller, told race fans as we cut back to the race, said, hey, this race is not going to be run today. It's just not. They don't have the time to be able to do it. They can't get drivers to their cars. A lot of people are listening in the stands, and they left based upon what Robin said. They went to their cars. They were driving home. When all of a sudden, at 3:40 that afternoon, the call went out to drivers, get to your cars now. We're going. And at 4:05, the green flag flew, and all of a sudden that Brickyard 400 was being run, and we had people who trusted us, got in their cars, and were driving home instead of sitting in their seats watching that NASCAR event, the second ever Brickyard 400. People were upset, really upset. And when Donald Davidson went on the air with Talk of Gasoline Alley, all the calls were about being pissed off at WIBC for what WIBC did, and not about the history of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway or anything that Donald was familiar doing. So they went to a break, and I was like, Donald, you're not having any fun. You can't answer their questions. I can. So you know what? Why don't I host the rest? You go home. Don't worry about it. You're still going to get paid. And I'll host the rest of this. And I'll talk to the fans who are really, really pissed off about what they heard on WIBC, a trusted source of information. And I'll go the rest of the way. And so Donald happily signed off, and I took over. Bobby came in, Bobby Hatfield, our program director, and he had a 12-pack of Budweiser, and he goes, hey, here's a 12-pack. Let's take calls until it's gone. And I said, okay. And he drank beer, and I didn't drink beer, and once he had like 2 beers and you could hear it, I said, Bobby, why don't you just, why don't you take the rest of the night and go home? And I'll do this. And I told people, I'm taking complaint calls until there are no more complaint calls. We started at about 8 o'clock. And I was there to do a night show that I did then from 9 to midnight every Saturday. It was called Desperate and Dateless, and it was a horror show. Bobby wanted me to do it, so I did it. He thought that I could do radio, and God bless him for thinking I could do radio. It's turned out I can't. He was right again. So I was there. That's why I was there. And I took calls until 1:30 in the morning. It was a long time, but it was important that we were held accountable for the information that we gave listeners. They trusted us. We failed them with what we believed at the time, what Robin believed at the time was the correct information. Turned out it wasn't. But for over 4.5 hours, really 5 hours, I took call after call after call after call, all excoriating us for failing in delivering on listeners' trust. But the listeners' trust was the fuel of our ratings at the radio station. So ignoring them would have driven them to apathy, right? We want listeners to be engaged, and we want listeners to know that we like them being engaged, and we like it enough that I'm going to take calls on air or off. Hi, this is Kent. Oh, I see. And off they go, yelling and yelling, and that's fine. Well, let me explain to you why we do what we do. And either they would accept it or they wouldn't accept it, and that's fine. I'm doing mornings now on WGCL Radio in Bloomington, and I've replaced Hugh Hewitt. Hugh Hewitt, national host, really good. A lot of people in Bloomington like Hugh Hewitt, and so they listen to Hugh Hewitt. And now that I'm on it in the mornings from 7 to 9 instead of Hugh Hewitt, some of them are upset. They call, and if they leave their number, I return the call. If they access me over email, as somebody did earlier this week, I send them an email back. I had somebody call me whiny and outraged, which is, on a bad day, that can be the case. I responded back and said, I'm going to have a long talk with that guy. And then she responded very, very nicely. And I think her name was Deb. And I said, Deb, I promise you that if Indiana wins against Michigan, you know what? I'm going to be neither outraged nor whiny. on Monday morning. And she sent a little like smiley face emoji. I want smiley face emojis. I want to take somebody from being upset, dissatisfied with the product, voice their concern, and then realize they got a port in the storm to issue a complaint, get it heard, and maybe acted upon. And at the very least, understand that there's somebody at the other end of the line or the other end of the email who's going to respond and who's going to validate, right? Validate the connection they feel between themselves and the radio station. It's actually a great compliment to get a complaint. And it needs to be valued in that light. And if people call and they praise you, that's great too. If people rank you a 5 on a scale of 1 to 5, or rank you a 1 on a scale of 1 to 5, say thank you and go on with your day. Bad is good and good is good. That's the world we live in. That's media. If people are engaged, you win. So value that engagement even when it manifests itself in a complaint. I'm Kent Sterling. This was Sports Media 101, or just really Media 101, Social Media 101, Sports Media 101, Radio 101, Live Media 101. It's all 101. It's all very basic, but very few people act on complaints in the right way. So I thought it was important to share.